So this is a portrait of Stephen Waite. The first thing I do is sketch in very rough charcoal and reinforce that with a few diluted brush strokes. This is in oil, so the first few brush strokes are just to capture the dark features, the darkest part of the eyes, the glasses, the mouth, that sort of thing. And then I start putting in the mid-tones, which in this case is going from a sort of mid-red grey to a lighter middle red grey to get some volume in the face. And then start working with the darker, cooler tones of the hair, shirt and jacket. And at this stage I'm more concerned with the big shapes, such as how large the head is compared to the canvas, and how much of the shirt and jacket I'm putting in, to make sure that everything is the way I want it to look before I get down to any details. And also the colour harmony. I start looking for the type of colours that I'm going to use in this portrait. And as you can see, I'm using grey reds and cool greys both for the background, jacket, shirt and face, and they all harmonise together. And my first goal is to find that harmony and find those proportions, so that regardless of detail I have the overall impression of how the portrait is going to look. And when that is in place, as it's starting to be now, because I can see the portrait, it doesn't have to look like Stephen, it just has to have his proportions. And now at this stage I can go around and start to look at each area and detail it a little bit, refine the details and the colours. What I'm looking for at this stage, first of all, is the details which I think are significant, and then after I've done those details I start to just look at the picture as a whole and look at the model and think, well, does this look like Stephen? Not in a purely physical way, but does it feel like Stephen? Am I getting his character? And if something doesn't quite work, like say for example I might think, well, Steve looks a happier chap than the one I've painted, then I'll look into the eyes, for example, and see if there's something not quite right about the eyes, or perhaps the mouth that's just giving a bit more expression which I'm missing. It's not always a case of copying exactly, it's feeling that expression and then looking for it in the model. Always this mixture, as you can see, of warm and cool brush strokes which bring the skin tones to life. It's not always certain what will bring a portrait to life and make it look like the model, because it's not a case of copying the photograph. If you wanted to copy a photograph, you would just copy it exactly the way it is, and then it would be hardly any point in doing a painting. But so it's a case of interpretation, and therefore the interpretation is going through your feelings, and so you might put on an accented brushstroke, one that carries a little bit more weight or colour or sharpness, and that might do something to the portrait which pushes it in the right direction. Or it may conversely not do the right thing, and you might put that brushstroke on and think, oh no, that's going in the wrong direction, I'm moving away from the character of the sitter. And if that's the case, then you have to think, well, you have to readjust that portrait and then look to see what might be the next brushstroke which will nudge it closer to the character of the person sitting. And that's where I am now, just going around looking at those different areas, particularly around the eyes and mouth, but it can be anywhere. Even a background brushstroke can make a big difference to the feeling of the portrait. So one thing you mustn't do, and as you can see I filled the background in very quickly and early, because it all integrates and has something to do with the character of the portrait. So it's very important to bring it all up together, and you can see I've put a texture into the background of the portrait, which is actually what's behind Stephen now is actually a stone wall. And I'm still quite happy, in fact, adding more bold brush strokes. It's easier to soften down if you actually smooth the painting down too much. By too much blending and overworking, tend to lose some of the character, and I prefer to see these brush strokes in the painting. And here I'm just going into the eyes for a little bit of refinement. The eyes, of course, usually are the focus of a portrait, so after I've gone round a painting a few times, towards the end I start to look more closely at the eyes. It's easy for me, with my method, my approach, to actually forget that they are the focus, because I'm looking at the whole and the way that the painting comes together abstractly as a whole, and then it's easy to lose sight of the areas that need detail because I'm not particularly looking at those. So I have to make a conscious effort to remind myself to go in and look at those areas of detail, and that's where I'm just doing now, checking those eyes, make sure that they do actually work well as Stephen's eyes and have his character and that look to them, that feeling. So I've just blended all that down a little bit, and now we're looking really at the final touches of this portrait, any last little things. Just one or two touches here and there, not very much at all. At this point, as I've mentioned, I'm not looking at what more detail can I add to the picture. I'm just looking at the feeling of the picture, just trying to take it in, just get the feeling from it, and then if something feels wrong, then I'll look to see what area of detail or what brush stroke or what is going wrong to not convey the right feeling across. But I'm not just searching for details. I only search for things to correct if the feeling isn't right. So if, for example, the mouth doesn't feel right, or the eyes don't feel right, or just the whole thing just doesn't feel right, then I'll start searching around for brush strokes, hard edges, soft edges, colour changes, warm and cool, light and dark, anything that I may not have right. So now I'm just adding a few little highlights there. These are something that I often leave towards the end, when I can see just how light I want to go with those final touches. And there, I think, is the portrait finished.